I'm Richard. I'm the fabricator here at Charley Garage, and today we're going to be customizing the rear tail lights on this 51 Ford. And the first move we're going to have to make, we've already got our tape laid out to where we want to make our cut lines. So we're going to be removing this piece of metal and just going to start from scratch with a new piece of metal. But before you start cutting, it's always smart to come in here. There's a lot of undercoating on the inside of the car, and you want to get that removed because that will contaminate your weld on in the process, and you won't get a good quality weld. So basically how you'd want to remove that, get a torch, lightly heat it up, and it'll scrape right off. Come back with some lacquer thinner, make sure you get it down to bare metal before you cut, because that'll, like I said, it'll get a lot of contaminants when you TIG weld and get a lot of porosity in your weld, and you just won't be happy with a final product. So what we'll do, we'll start, since we already have the inside cleaned out, we're ready to start cutting and making our pattern for our new piece. So now that we have this section removed, what we're going to do, we'll take a 3-inch grinder, and we want to just come up and clean this up, slick it up a little bit more to get all the burrs off left from the cutting wheel. You want to clean your metal around where you're going to be welding back about 1 inch, which, just like the undercoating, will also contaminate your weld because you want good and clean metal for a good TIG weld. Okay, well, once I ground the sealer off the metal, I've noticed that we might still have just a little bit of roll left in from the original piece that went there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the hammer and dolly and just run it in there, and then I will just want to tap that to make sure we've got a good flat surface before we make our pattern. So now we're at the point we want to make our pattern. So it usually takes 2 people to basically hold the chipboard up behind it. And it's simple. You want a nice fine line because you don't want your piece to be too big or too small. If it's too big, the metal won't butt up, and then it's just going to create problems down the road. A lot of grinding to make sure it fits, so it's easier to get it with a fine line and get it the first time. So now we have our piece cut, kind of stuck in place, but next thing you will notice that the metal right here, that our piece is still flat, to where a car normally is going to have like a slightest bit of roll. So that's when we'll take this piece, we'll take it to the English wheel, and we'll work it and make sure we try to sneak up on it, because when you go too far, you're going to create yourself a lot more work, if not have to start over. So we'll just go over to the English wheel, try to get our nice curve to it, and then we'll be ready to tack it in place. Now, at this step of the process, it's important not to get discouraged. It's almost impossible to get your piece to fit perfect the first time. So it's going to take several trips back and forth to the grinding table to get it to fit perfect, because you want your metal to butt right up. You don't want like barely overlapping, because what that'll do after you weld it, it's going to cause you a lot of trouble to where you're going to end up having to use plastic filler or something, just because your metal's never going to plane back out like it would have from factory. So yeah, as I said, don't get discouraged if you have to keep going back and grinding it 3 or 4 or 5 times. So our next step is going to be tack weld this in place. And for that job, we're going to use the Millermatic 211. Very versatile machine. Real easy for beginners to set it. It has the auto set. So basically, you just set what gauge of wire you're going to be using and thickness of metal, and the machine's smart enough that it sets itself. So that automatically makes it a plus. Plus, depending on your what your power situation is, it's easily 110 to 220 conversion, which makes it like you could take it anywhere. You could take it to a neighbor's garage if you had to do something, or if you were doing maybe chassis fabrication, it's strong enough to hold it. So all in all, it's a well-rounded machine. So now we're ready to weld this piece in, which will be our next step. But before we do, we'll want to take the 3-inch grinder or any other kind of grinder you have laying around your garage, and you want to knock the heads of the spot welds that were left from the MIG. And so that way, when you're taking it up, you don't have to throw, you want to limit the amount of heat you put towards your panel. And so that way you don't have to get that certain area so hot before it'll start melting the metal and fusing them together. We're going to skip around. What you do when you skip around, you kind of control the heat of the metal. The hotter you're going to get this metal, it being such a flat panel, it's going to have a tendency to want to just warp and you know, and you could do more damage by welding it up, you know, than you can possibly work out. So we'll weld in little inch increments, just, you know, pick and choose. And we'll also, you'll notice that we'll hammer and dolly behind every inch we weld, and what that'll do, that'll relieve the shrinkage. As when you weld, the metal's going to automatically want to shrink. So when you hammer and dolly it, that's like stretching the metal out and getting it back to like to the state you want it to be in. We're going to use the Dynasty 200. This is actually recently new to our shop, and we've used it for about 2 or 3 months now. And I have to say, it's a great machine. I love it. The remote foot pedal is just so handy. That's one less cord you're having to fight with, especially, you know, you're having to crawl up in a car. You know, it just almost gets to be a headache when you're having to run so many leads. So this machine is excellent. It's quiet, and really it's very versatile. I mean, whatever, you know, aluminum, stainless, mild steel, it'll serve the purpose for any application that you're looking for. We have just completed TIG welding our replacement panel, so now we're down to the grinding. And we're going to take the same 3-inch grinder. We're just going to grind right along the weld. We want to stay off the surrounding metal, and then just grind that down smooth. And depending on the application, we're going to have a little bit more hammer and dolly work, because we want this panel as smooth as possible to eliminate a whole lot of filler that we'd have to put in there. Okay, so now we've completed a slight modification to the rear quarter of the 51 Street Rodder car. The first step was to getting the inside underlayment all good and clean. Then we taped off, made our cuts, got the old piece out, formed a new piece on the English wheel, set it back into place, spot welded in with a MIG welder, and then finished it up with a TIG. And then we ground it all back down to a uniform shape, so this thing's ready to go to the body shop for some filler and paint. For more racing, customizing, and restoring tips, go to millerwelds.com.